Hi, good day. My name is Maria Nagy, and thank you for joining Adventures of a Startup Founder podcast. And today we're going to focus more on a sciencey-esque topic. I had a discussion with ChatGPT. Lately, I've been discussing with a friend about the concept of past lives and reincarnation. And, I was raised Roman Catholic and went to private Catholic school for 8 years. So my personal beliefs have really been rooted in that. But at being a scientist, I wanted to look and explore and to see what kind of information or data that was out there about the concept of past lives. And so I had a discussion with ChatGPT and I asked for pros and cons and the latest and greatest information about that topic. And I have compiled a handful of pages about that and wanted to use this as a platform to discuss. And then looking forward to discuss what I have learned and what it's talking about. And then I look forward to hearing from you guys to see if anyone has thoughts about it. Obviously, it's heavily rooted in religion and cultural beliefs, and I understand that. But I wanted to try to separate that out and take a moment and look to see what kind of scientific evidence there is about this topic. So here we go. I have about 14 pages of notes, and I'm going to go over them and to kind of chit chat and discuss. Okay, so the concept of past lives or reincarnation. It sits in the intersection of science, philosophy, psychology, and spirituality. And then here are some scientific pros and cons when evaluating this concept. And just to say, like, hey, this is on this channel, we're going to be discussing a bunch of different kind of topics. I didn't want to just stay on one thing. And this is the rabbit hole that I've been going down on, that I've been going in and, really thinking about. And so, yeah, so sometimes I will present these kind of topics. The rest of the time, it'll be about startups, longevity, uh, bio science, and other topics, productivity and such. Anyway, let's get back to it. Okay, reincarnation or past lives, it's in the intersection of science, philosophy, psychology, and spirituality, and the pro and con arguments. So we're going to start with the pro arguments, and it lists 4 different categories: documented cases in children, hypnotic regression, personality and phobia evidence, and quantum theories of consciousness, right? So these all appear to be observational, but let's see what it talks about. So there's this one researcher coming out of Virginia, University of Virginia. His name is Dr. Ian Stevenson. He's a psychiatrist, and he's documented thousands of cases where young children recalled specific details of past lives, including names, places, cause of death, and often verified by independent researchers. And then there are some children that have birthmarks or birth defects that correspond with injuries or traumas that happened in their alleged life, past lives. And then there's hypnotic regression. And this is that when someone is under hypnosis, some adults described detailed past life experiences that appear historically accurate and sometimes include languages or accents that have never consciously been learned. And I think Dolores Cannon writes about this stuff a lot. He also says is that critics argue that this could be cryptomnesia, which is hidden memory. But in some cases, show knowledge that is hard to explain. Okay. Then you've got personality and phobia evidence that certain phobias and preferences or unexplainable talents emerge early in life and sometimes align with past life memories. In other words, an intense fear of water, matching, I recall drowning. Okay, that's interesting. And then quantum theories of consciousness. So some physicists like Penrose and Hameroff's OR theory have speculated that consciousness could be a quantum process that's not entirely dependent on the brain. Consciousness could be a quantum process that is not entirely dependent on the brain. If consciousness is more than brain-based, the door to survival after death and possibly reincarnation opens a bit wider. So I have thoughts, but I'm not going to express them yet. Okay, so these are scientific cons or arguments against the problematic aspects of past lives. There's a lack of empirical reproducibility. So reincarnation claims are typically anecdotal and are hard to reproduce or test under controlled conditions, making them unfalsifiable, which is a key principle in science. And then there's memory fallibility. The brain is prone to confabulation and suggestibility, especially in hypnosis. Many memories can be influenced by suggestion, culture, unconscious synthesis, or information from media and what's overheard in conversations. Okay, no mechanism of transfer. There's no physical or biological mechanism to explain how consciousness or memory would transfer from one body to another after death. Well, if there is a soul, then this transfer would occur via the soul. And many religions acknowledge the fact that there is a soul, right? The soul, the Holy Spirit. So, but that soul would have to stay intact in some capacity when it separates from the body. And again, there's no proof around this soul concept or no hard discernible proof around the soul concept. And not only would it be some kind of energy, but it would have to have imprinted memory, some kind of imprinted memory on top of this soul. I'm just saying that that's what would have to happen in order for this mechanism of transfer. Alternate explanations or more psychological theories. So there's disassociation, there's cryptosemia, and fantasy proneness. Often explain reincarnation-like experiences without invoking metaphysical claims. So cryptomnesia is like a fake memory, as they describe it up here. What is it right here? It's a hidden memory. It's described as a hidden memory, disassociation, and fantasy proneness. Okay, cultural variability. So past life memories are far more common. Okay, cultural variability. It's far more common in cultures that already believe in reincarnation, suggesting a cultural priming for it or confirmation bias that may be at play. So in the Eastern religions and such, the concept of past lives is acceptable. I mean, is part of their religious and cultural beliefs, versus here in the States or such, it would not be. And then I asked, I said, well, in modern science, how would you test for this idea? And then it said to scientifically test the idea of past life using modern methods, researchers would need to find measurable, reproducible evidence, ideally with ways to rule out conventional explanations like memory errors, cultural influence, or fraud. Rigorous case studies like Stevenson and Tucker's work. Method: interview young children who claim past life memories, ideally before they've been heavily exposed to media or cultural expectations. So you would have to interview kids before they have before they've been exposed to media or cultural expectations. The control would be to confirm the details of these before any outside contact with a family or of the previous personality. And then modern tools, you would need video and audio recordings of interviews. You would need DNA comparisons. You need forensic analysis of injuries and birthmarks and geolocation tracking of families and child movements to rule out exposure. Got it. Okay, Dr. Jim Tucker continued Ian Stevenson's work, applying more rigorous screening and statistical analysis. Okay. So brain imaging during hypnotic regression. So there's the method, the goal, the culture, and the control and what to watch for. So the method is using fMRI or EEG to monitor brain waves in people undergoing past life regression hypnosis. The goal is to determine if the brain regions associated is with imagination versus memory recall, and or if memory recall is more active. That's interesting. And then control, compare with people recalling the actual memories and those inventing fictional stories. Okay. So you would run controls. You do this hypnotic regression. You'd have a hypnotherapist doing hypnotic regressions, and you'd have some fake people and then some real people, and then compare and see how that goes. And then what to watch for is any unusual brain patterns, language production, memory formation that doesn't know known pathways. So language and knowledge verification, there's method, tool, and control. Method is to analyze spontaneous use of foreign language, exozoology, or historically accurate terms. Or tool is the linguistic analysis of expert translation, review or confirmed authenticity. Or control, verify the school who has had no known access of this language or historical content. You know, I think it's interesting now that we're talking about the people that, come out of coma and then they're talking a foreign language, or they have a certain accent, or they have skills that they never thought they had. I'm just saying, or never knew, like they come out playing piano or something. AI and big data analysis. So the method, use AI to compare thousands of claimed cases for statistical patterns. This is consistency and memory types, geographic clustering, or time intervals between death and rebirth. Go. Identify whether patterns deviates significantly from chance or cultural expectations. Bonus. AI can also help detect hoaxes or implausible case details. This next category is genetic or epigenetic traces. I think this one's interesting to me as a scientist. While speculative, some researchers would wonder if past trauma could carry epigenetically as transgenerational trauma. The method is examine whether alleged reincarnation cases show unusual genetic or epigenetic markers shared with the deceased. Yes and no. Yes and no. Yes and no. And I'll tell you why. Because if you have two people, and I've been thinking about the epigenetic, if you have two people, right? And for generational epigenetic transgenerational trauma would have to be like this or like this. There has to be some family lineage, and the information is passed as an epigenetic methylation pattern from one to another. But there has to be some link through there'd have to be some link, ancestral link between the people. Now, if what we're talking about is soul passage from one, so the information is on the soul, it can go from one ancestral tree to another. Okay, it can go from one to another. It wouldn't say stay in the, it wouldn't be, couldn't be passed epigenetically, because epigenetically is flesh, it's DNA, it's passed through genetic markers from one person to another. But if we're talking about souls being passed from one to another, that's a whole different thing. Then it would be a soul that's passed from one to another, right? And that soul has some kind of memory attached. Okay, so controlled perspective studies, the wild idea and then the controlled. So the wild idea is track thousands of people's and life experience, then monitor children born in the same region for alleged memories of those deaths. Okay, that's a wild idea. Yeah. Control requires strong matching criteria for considering any match as possible evidence. Hmm. Hmm. Well, I think if you're looking for matches, you're going to find them. I don't know. Okay, summary. So modern science can't prove reincarnation directly, yet it can apply vigorous skepticism, use forensic validation, neurological imaging, and AI, and it can rule out alternative explanations. So let me know. Okay. So explore a futuristic experiment or thought experiment on this. It gets weird in a good way. Okay, so good. So I said, can you talk about Dr. Ivan Stevenson a little bit more? And then he lived from 1918 to 2007. He's a Canadian-born psychiatrist and a professor of the University of Virginia, who is best known for his meticulous documented research into the cases of children who claimed to remember past lives. And he's considered to be the most credible academic figure to have explored reincarnation in a scientific context. So who was he? He was the chairman of Department of Psychiatry at University of Virginia, later founded the Division of Perceptual Studies. and he's which still investigates phenomenon like past life memories and near-death experiences. And his background is an MD with strong grounding in scientific skepticism. Initially studied psychosomatic medicine and believed many claims to be psychological in origin. So let's see what he did. He looked for 40 years investigating documents of 2,500 cases in countries where people believe that reincarnation is common. India, Sri Lanka, Lebanon, Turkey, and Burma, and also in the West. Okay, key elements of his work. Children's spontaneous memories. He focused on children, often the age of 2 to 5, who spontaneously spoke of past lives, usually describing names, family members, professions, causes of death, and locations. Verifiable details. Stevenson's cross-checked the children's claims with real individuals who had died, sometimes decades before the children was born. Many cases included highly specific details that were later verified by independent third parties, and the families involved had no prior contact. Birthmarks and physical traits. He published studies on children with birthmarks or deformities that match the wounds, especially fatal ones, from the purported previous life, and confirms by autopsy reports. And he compiled 200 plus cases in the book Reincarnation and Biology. Notable books. They mentioned 20 cases suggestive of reincarnation, written in 1974. Where Reincarnation and Biology Intersect, was published, in 1997. And then Children Who Remember Previous Lives, 1987, and then it was revised. So his famous book is the 20 cases suggestive of reincarnation. And these cases include strong documentation, including transcripts, photos, and investigation notes. And then where Reincarnation and Biology Intersect, focus on physical evidence, birthmarks, and deformities that tied past life trauma. And then a summary intended for general audience with psychological or physiological implications. So the criticism and limitations, there's 4 of them. Skepticism about objectivity. Critics argue that cultural beliefs in reincarnation may bias both the children and the investigators. Okay. The possibility of information leakage in small communities. It's hard to rule out the possibility of the child that the child overheard what was told or was told the information. And then lack of biological mechanism. There's no accepted scientific framework explaining how a personality or memory could be transferred between bodies. Again, I mean, it comes back to the epigenetic transfer. It could be, but that it has to be but that has to be in, that would have to stay in, it would have to stay in the family tree, the ancestral lineage. The only way to not stay in ancestral lineage is by a soul that a separate entity, i.e. the soul, that would transfer from one person to another, and then there's memory attached to that soul. If then. Okay, and non-reproducibility. The cases are rich and compelling, but cannot be replicated or tested in lab settings. Even skeptics admit that Stevenson's approach on the topic with scientific care and caution, never claiming absolute proof, but rather calling the cases suggestive. The Division of Perceptual Studies at UAV continued this work and is now led by Dr. Jim Tucker, who has focused on American cases. I think that's interesting because reincarnation is not culturally accepted here in the States. So I think that that's interesting. Okay. So here are some cases. So American cases. Okay, this is from Dr. Jim Tucker. All right, so he focused Tucker focused on similar phenomenon that could be found in cultures without strong reincarnation beliefs, which makes the claims even more interesting to skeptics and scientists alike. So who is Dr. Jim Tucker? His profession is a child psychiatrist and researchers in UAV. You know, I will say something. You might have cultural beliefs or not have cultural beliefs as an overarching accepted thought process in a particular area, but what an individual or a family think could be different than the entire culture that's around them. Okay, so just felt like saying that. Focus. Children in the U.S. spontaneously describe memories of past lives, often between the ages of 2 and 6. He's got 2 books. One was written in 2005, Life Before Life, and then 2013, Return to Life. They focus on American cases, and he continues to collect and investigate and publish these claims. Okay. Again, focusing on children. In most cases, the family have no known connection to the person the child claims to have been. The child typically has not been exposed to media or stories that would provide details they describe. And then emotional intensity. The child often has strong emotional reactions, grief, anger, longing when describing the events from their past life. And some even have nightmares or phobias linked to the way they have died. And then behavioral traits. Some children display behaviors consistent with the personality or the habits of the deceased person, using certain phrases, hand gestures, or interest. Okay, here's one example. James Linginger, probably the most well-known U.S. reincarnation case. James Linginger from Louisiana began having violent nightmares about crashing in a plane around age 2. He said he was a pilot shot down from World War II, flying a Corsair plane from a ship called Natoma, the Natoma. He named the ship and another pilot, Jack Larson, and said that he was killed at Iwo Jima. He signed pictures of James III, later claimed to be third James, or after James Hutchinson Jr., the pilot who died in the crash. The Lingingers eventually located the family from James Hutchinson Jr., a World War II pilot who had died in the exact way that their son describes. Many of the statements were historically verified, including obscure details of surviving veterans and only military historians would know. Tucker's analysis is Tucker investigated the case carefully, reviewed timelines, and found no evidence that James could have learned of those details by normal means. It's featured in Tucker's book, Return to Life, and was covered on major platforms like ABC, CNN in 2020. Scientific approach used by Tucker is timelines, corroborating evidence, interviews, and statistical analysis to find patterns across the cases. Okay. He is careful not to claim reincarnation as proven fact, but rather says that it's cases with no conventional explanation. Themes in Tucker's U.S. cases, there's sudden violent deaths in the past lives. Children often feel like unfinished business, like needing to reconnect with family or continue a life cut short. And there's often a short time span between the death and the children's birth, like less than 5 years. Interesting. Okay, there's another story that I asked for. I had heard about the child getting hit in the head by an axe. Yes, this sounds like the Sanjay case from India, written by Evan Stevenson, the most traumatic and chilling cases that a child's name was Ravi Shankar, and he claimed to remember being a man who was murdered with an axe blown to the head. His memories ultimately helped lead to the real arrest for the murderer. So the child's name was Ravi Shankar, was born in India, and around age 2 or 3 began speaking about a past life. He claimed to have been a man named Sunjali or Shankar, depending on the translation. And he was murdered with an axe to the head. He remembered his former name, the village he had lived in, specific people and circumstances around his death. The boy described being attacked from behind with an axe. He gave the names of people involved in the incident. He pointed to a specific scar or birthmark on the head. And it matched the location of the fatal injury. Verification. When researchers followed up, they found that a man by the name he had given was indeed died under suspicious circumstances in the village that the boy mentioned, that the death had been officially unsolved or labeled as an accident. The boy's account included individuals who had not been considered suspects, and authorities reopened the case, and eventually a confession was obtained from one of the named individuals. So the evidence was the distinct birthmark of where the axe had hit him in the head. And then Stevenson particularly interested in these kind of physical correlations, and he later cataloged that in his book Reincarnation in the Biology. And then why does this case stand out? The boy's memory was predated to any possible exposure. The information he gave was unknown to his family, and then testimony led to an actual legal consequence, including a confession and an arrest. So Stevenson's view on this is that Stevenson described this case as one of the most striking examples of versatile past life memory, especially because it involved verifiable historical details. There's no plausible explanation, and was actionable enough to influence a criminal investigation. This case is one of the rare examples where past life memories appear to solve a crime, which gives the unique status in the study of reincarnation. Um, okay, at that point, I asked about more examples, US based examples. And then he gave me another one, Ryan Hammond's Hollywood agent or actor. And then he began recalling memories at the age of 4 and 5. Details included things like that he was someone in Hollywood. He remembers acting and dancing in Broadway and having a daughter named Jennifer. He described working for an agency, traveling to Paris, and having a friend named Senator Five. The boy recognized people and places with stunning accuracy. He pointed to an unknown man in the 1930s photo and said, "That's me." The man was later identified as Marty Martin, a background actor who became a Hollywood agent. Personal details matched is the number of siblings, that he died from a heart condition, that he owned a large house and had a daughter named Jennifer. And Tucker was able to confirm 50 specific facts from Ryan that matched Marty's life. The next example is Hunter and it's a Civil War case. And the age was around 4 years old. Details claimed that he was a Civil War soldier who had died in battle, that he was unusually obsessed with guns, military history from a very early age. He described being shot and dying during a particular battle. He claimed to have fought for the Confederacy, though his family had no such background. Dr. Tucker traced some of his description to a real soldier who had died in the way described. The family had never visited Civil War sites before the child began recounting the story. Another example is Kathy with the Chicago fire case, that at age 3, she spoke about dying in a fire and described the city with tall buildings, horses on the street, and people yelling fire. She kept having nightmares of being trapped in a burning building. Drew imagines city blocks with horse-drawn fire engines. Verification: the family had no historical knowledge or interest in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, but Kathy's description matched the time and place exactly. She described landmarks and that no longer existed and used a vocabulary appropriate for the 16th century. The thing that makes these cases compelling is that the children were very young. They described very specific and obscure facts. They had emotional intensity and personality traits linked to their prior life. Later forgot or lost interest in the memories, common after age 6 or 7. Dr. Tucker's investigations involved interviews with families, timelines, historical fact checking, and attempts to rule out normal explanations. Okay, and then I asked if there was anything similar to the axe murder story that I thought was US based, and they said no. There's one that was in the Syria-Israel border where there was a 3-year-old from Golan Heights, and he claimed to remember a past life where he was murdered with an axe, and this account had been widely circulated online. That the birthmark corresponded. The boy had a distinct red mark on his head. In many cultures, such red marks are believed to correspond to injuries from previous lives. Past life memories. As soon as he could speak, the boy began recounting memories of being murdered with an axe. He provided specific details about the village that he lived in and the location of his body. There was discovery of his remains. The villager elders discovered the human remains at the location that he indicated, and they found an axe nearby. Confirmation and confrontation and confession. The boy identified the man in the village as his murderer, and initially denying the accusation, the man allegedly confessed to the crime and was once presented with the evidence. So this case is often highlighted in discussions about reincarnation due to the specificity of the boy's memories and the physical evidence that seemingly corroborated his account. It had been referenced in various articles and discussions, like Skeptic Stack Exchange. And then while the story is compelling, it's essential to approach such accounts with critical perspective. The primary sources are anecdotal, and there's lack of peer-reviewed scientific documents to substantiate the claim. And as with many cases purported reincarnation memories, especially those involving young children, interpretations vary and definitive conclusions remain elusive. This is more of a repeat. And that's it. That's the evidence. And that's the evidence that was provided, and then corresponding arguments against. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions, and tell me if this was useful or interesting in any way. And thanks. I will talk to you later.